Wizard101's latest tweet is teasing what could be one of the craziest changes they've ever added into the game. I don't know if y'all follow the Wizard101 dev Twitter, but a couple of days ago, they put out this image that you see on your screen. And if you're freaking out, you should be. What this image shows is a series of jewels that give the same amount of pierce to one school as they do to a second one. The specific image that you see teases just a Storm and Life one, but as you can see, there's a lot of other names on that list. What it looks like to me is if you're on any school, you could choose any secondary school that, like, you know, appeals to you and get the same amount of pierce on your jewels for both. Now, that would be an incredibly crazy transition from what we've been used to, because honestly, these jewels are extremely outdated. These 6% pierce jewels have literally been around since they introduced the jewel system. We're talking about when Chrysalis was the final world, and level 95 jewels were the best jewels you could get. Since then, the circle slots have not changed at all. And honestly, that's for really good reason. I don't think it makes any sense to increase the number that you get from a pierce jewel from 6 to like 7 or 8, because then the game would get really offensive. So this feels like the only real natural progression for circle jewels, but I wanted to talk about how dual school jewels like this could completely change up the game. Now, effectively, what this new change would do is it would add 18 pierce, up to 18 pierce for any secondary school you want on any school. Now, let's talk about how that 18 pierce could make dual schooling, as in you hit with one school, but you also have very ready access to a second school for utility and damage purposes. Let's talk about how dual schooling could actually change with just that 18%. Right now, without a doubt, if you have all of the meta gear, the one limiting stat when it comes to dual schooling is pierce. If I had like the perfect, you know, punishing pins and all that on my fire, I would have 173 fire damage and I'd have 171 myth damage. It's easier than ever to get maxed out accuracy. I don't do that right now, but because of the fact that all your Aeon gear gives pip chance, all it really takes is an extra triangle jewel here or there. And once the accuracy and the damage are resolved, the real limiting factor is pierce. If, let's say that there was a jewel that gave 6% fire pierce and 6% myth pierce, I would be running over 50 pierce to myth on a fire. And I really do think that would add quite a bit to the game. I could already see strategies where I shield so that I can use like a troll, right? Because this gambit shields to detonate over time. But while I'm shielding, I could also set up a myth shield gambit and actually do good damage with it outside of Shrike. Now, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of this because I think this is going to be a crazy debate in the community, because this is a big shift compared to what we're used to. Let's talk about the pros first, though. I think the pros are ginormous, and I think that this is not stated enough. People see change like this, they see something, you know, radically changing in the game, and they're like, this is bad. And while we can talk about the bad part, let's talk about the good part as well. You have an extreme amount of variety when it comes to both PvP and PvE. You could argue that a change like that actually gives use to every spell that they've made in the game. And what I mean by that is, when they did their most recent spell audit, every spell in the game basically fits one of 3 identities for its school. For example, the fire that I have, you'll notice that its main identities are traps, overtimes, and heals. But you might notice that most fires, they really lean into the traps and they lean into the overtimes, but you don't really ever see them leaning into things that involve healing, like for example, the Spellmented Phoenix. But now you actually can run fire damage and fire pierce on a life. You might see Phoenix being used when it otherwise wouldn't, just because a life might. You'll see the complete gallery of spells that we've never seen used in PvP able to be used because of the fact that some synergies just work better on other schools. Beyond the variety and the unused synergy that we kind of like, you know, are missing in my opinion, you also see a really cool scenario where mirror matchups are going to be less reliant on RNG. Right now, if I had like, you know, like a death versus death, very honestly, it's gonna come down to criticals, it's gonna come down to who deck fails. But the second you add a secondary school, it's no longer death versus death. It could be death with a storm mastery versus a death with like a myth mastery. So we're seeing like an individualized approach to PvP that we currently kind of just don't have. I also think when it comes to making more and more ambitious PvE experiences, I think the fact that dual schooling might be a way to circumvent cheats, school-specific things, like that could be a really, really cool concept that we just don't see at all in Wizard 101. Like, there's no PvE bosses where dipping into another school helps you, and that could make for a really cool challenge. It could make for a series of cool challenges. But let's address the elephant in the room, and this is probably what most critics of something like this would have. Would this destroy school identity? Does this just mean, for example, since life gets so much extra fire damage, would this just mean that life is a better fire? And to that, I'd say absolutely not. You don't know what you're talking about. And the reason I say this is because even if you had 6 punishing pins, like the best of the best, on a life wizard, one, you would have to give up 29 outgoing to have 6 instead of 5 like I'm running right now. But even if you did, you're not actually running good damage like for fire. You're not. The pins don't give as much damage for lower DPP school, and they certainly already don't give that much pierce. Let's say that I had the full 21 pierce from 6 punishing pins. Even if I were to have, right, all this damage and I would have 18 extra pierce added onto it, I'm still running, like, we're talking like a lot less pierce than a normal fire. We're talking like 20 less pierce. What I would be able to do, however, is use fire spells for utility purposes and also use their gambit. Now, I haven't even bothered to trade the gambits, but like, let's say that, you know, I had a couple of heals and I wanted to use an Infernal Oni. I could actually do that now, and it would be very, very good because of the high damage per pip. And considering that shadow spells are no PvP, I don't really see a good argument whatsoever for how someone could manipulate their stats even with this extra pierce to out damage a storm on a non-storm, for example. I do think that the concern is valid because I don't know if y'all remember when, like, there was like a period of time where ice wizards would run, we're talking like literally 6 punishing pins for storm. They would run like, you know, like the level 160 version of the professor staff and just have like a ton of damage. And they would also run like Darkmoor Thames and Darkmoor rings, and what that would do for them is they would actually get universal damage, and they would basically just have extremely high resist, extremely high HP, and hit like a storm. But you can't hit like a storm unless you have a storm hits, and storm shads not being PvP like STCs, and you can't train them. There's no way I really see, like, you know, a life being a better fire or an ice being a better storm. I don't see any of that. I see very unique combination. I think this change could be so nuanced that, like, literally a Mitt dual schooling with fire versus a fire dual schooling with Mitt would be radically different concepts. And I think that's super, super preferable, because otherwise you see a weird scenario where some schools are just meta by not playing to anything they're supposed to be good at. I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised that they went this route with promoting dual schooling. I mean, we knew this was going to be a thing, especially with how heavy the ward meta has become. Like, dual schooling is a valid way to win a matchup that you're warded against, and it's important and needed. But I really thought they would go the way of spells more and more, to the point where it doesn't make sense not to dual school. That being said, this is a reason to dual school now more than ever. You don't have to. I'm sure people will have plenty of success, especially on some schools that are just good on their own right. Maybe you don't need to dual school. But now we have the option of filling our school weaknesses with a different school way, way better than we've ever had before. What do you guys think of the dual school jewels? I know that some people are probably a little apprehensive because it's like a big change, but let me know. Do you guys, are you more nervous about the effects of this, or are you more excited? And I would love to know why that is, because honestly, I love reading y'all's comments on stuff like this. Drop a comment, let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you guys think about my opinions on this. Drop a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something. I'll see y'all soon. Stay awesome, y'all. And yeah, y'all.